Welcome to the Next Level podcast. Today we are going to talk about vocabulary, which is one of those things that I've told you many times. If you want to go to the next level, you have to enhance your vocabulary. And I have a very good guest tonight, and it's teacher Chris. Teacher, hello, welcome.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for inviting me.
Okay, I want you to know why I invited you to the show. Um, so the teacher Chris had a TV show, which I loved, and I remember that TV show not only encouraged me to become a teacher, but also I learned a lot of words that I had no idea that those words existed. You remember the show, obviously.
I think I
I
do.
mean, big chunk of your life. And that's why I said, okay, if I'm going to talk about vocabulary, then I'm going to talk to someone who, in a previous part of my life, I thought, wow, this girl really knows vocabulary. And that's you. So let's talk about vocabulary. But before that, what would you think is the best way to go from B1, B2, which is what normally courses stop, to go to that next level, which is C1 and C2? What do you think students need to do to get to that level?
Okay, so first of all, students need to understand that, in fact, reaching level B1 and B2 is the easiest. I mean, it's the shortest path. But moving from B2 to C1, it's going to take as much time as it took you from A1 to B2. That's a fact. Why? Precisely because of what you're saying, because of vocabulary. So it's all about, I mean, you know the grammar, you know the structure, you know the functions, and you're communicative. You can communicate, right?
Yeah.
What is it now? Vocabulary. So being able to enhance your vocabulary and use it in all contexts. That is the main difference. So what could be the strategy? Well, the best strategy is reading, exposure,
Okay. Okay.
exposure. There's nothing else. Again, you don't need, by this time you really don't need courses per se,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Courses won't take you that far. They won't, because it's going to be very controlled. It's going to be very basically
And there
controlled
are no
and
many
paced and
options.
slow.
There are no many options. I mean, if you, I did my homework and I was checking on, Medellin, and I was checking some other cities, and not a lot of places offered like a really advanced course. And then I found one, and it says C1, no, just C1. And then I checked on the topics and the themes, and I thought, but people in B2 should know this already. So there are not like real options to get there. So mainly, and I agree with you, if you want to go to C1, it's your job. I mean, it's your job with different strategies such as reading.
Exactly. So why reading? Well, I mean, but it's not just reading, it's because you also have to have some sort of motivation. So there is this affective filter, there is the affective filter, there is the level of challenge. Okay, so these are all theories. If anybody wants to read a bit more, it's a Krashen's language acquisition theory. But anywho, right? So you need to be able to access things that you are motivated about, very motivated about. So it's not just trying to reach level C1 because you need a job or
Uh-huh.
because you need to go to a university. No, there has to be a communicative purpose. You need to want to understand and to learn that vocabulary.
All right. That's
Yes.
beautiful.
How do you do that? Reading things you are motivated about. So anything you would read in Spanish, you just look it up in English.
Hmm.
And then, not just reading, you need to read with critical thinking.
Okay.
It has to be done, because you can't read and then translate everything and then say, okay, now I know this vocabulary. No.
Yeah, I understand what it says. Yeah.
Exactly. No, you need to read and be able to contextualize, to find the meaning because of due to the context. So you need to be able to use the sentence, process the words, process the ideas, be able to use them. So it's not just, again, exposure and reading and said, okay, I saw the word, I looked it up in a dictionary or a translator, and I know what it is. No, you really need to interiorize it by using your critical thinking. And in fact, Alejo, what's the difference? Apart from vocabulary, the big difference between a B2 level and a C1, C2 level is the complexity of thinking, not
Okay.
even language, because the structures are basically the same. When you look
Yeah,
at a
I mean,
syllabus and you say, okay, again, conditionals, oh,
yeah,
again,
yeah.
past
What's the most advanced thing that you might find? A reported speech, and
causatives. Oh, causatives are awful.
yeah. Okay, okay. Causative verbs and stuff. But if you finish B2 and it was a good school, it was a good course, probably you saw that, which is great what you're saying. It's not about grammar. If you want to go to C1, it's not about grammar. It's about, making your vocabulary range bigger and bigger.
But it's also complexity of thinking. So that's basically the difference. So it's the fact that you are able to, if you look at the descriptors in the Common European Framework, you're going to see that a C1 is able to process, for example, abstract language
Okay.
or critical thinking language or more let's say intangible ideas. You
All
know
right.
what I mean? That's the complexity. That's why, for example, a C1 level is able to go to a university, do like in a course, or is also able to, no, I don't know. I mean, actually work in English, not just be operational, but be able to give ideas, be innovative. So be able, I mean, basically, language is at a C1 level, language is not a problem. It's just about what you're saying.
I
So
love what you're saying. I love what you're saying basically because when people think about vocabulary, they think about a list of words. And there are many words that I don't even know in Spanish, and I've been speaking Spanish 45 years of my life. Well, let's give and take 3 years, which I didn't speak. But when you say this, I immediately think about understanding jokes and metaphors, for example, and idioms and these kind of things that you say like, why did this person say that? I mean, why did he say that? And it's understanding that as the way you're saying, which makes me a better speaker or a C1 speaker or even C2 speaker.
exactly. Exactly. So it's not lists of vocabulary, it's about context now.
Okay.
It's about reading different types of texts. So
All right.
from formal to informal, from scientific to movies to everyday language. So it's exposure to all kinds of texts and languages. Like I like to say that language acquisition is similar to how you learn your native language. So what happens? Well, think of you mentioned 3 year old. Think of a 3 year old's native language, Spanish in this case. Take a 3 year old process of ideas, what they can say, a 9 year old, a 10 year old, and take it up a notch, right? How what kind of ideas can this person process? It's not until they are probably at university or working that they are saying different kinds of things
Mhm.
using different kinds of language.
All right.
So
All
the
right.
complexity of the ideas per se is what makes the difference. That's what's happening. Okay, so so again, it's reading and good old fashioned dictionary,
Oh,
not
okay.
translator. Why? Because to really know a word is not just to see it and identify and translate it, it's to be able to read it, be able to pronounce it, and be able to know if it's a noun, if it's a verb, if it's informal, if it's formal, what's the register, what are the nuances, what are the different types of
Is
uses.
it a verb, an adjective,
Exactly.
an
Exactly.
adverb? Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so we have what we call passive vocabulary, which is very big. That's a very big amount, and then we have active vocabulary. you know what it is. I can understand more Spanish than I can speak it, or I can understand more English than I can say. Right? That's basically it. So I know
Sure.
what you're saying, but I don't use it actively. So for you to be able to move that vocabulary from your passive reserve, let's say, you need to know about it to be able to be sure to use it. So
Uh-huh.
nuances, what do people understand? A nuance of the language, what do people understand by it? It's not just the dictionary definition, it's in reading or in
Sure.
series or in movies, how people are actually using it. Right, so
Yeah.
there's a lot to learn about the word, so you are able to use it with confidence.
I'm loving this conversation, especially because you're saying amazing thing, the dictionary thing. I mean, people would think, yeah, go to deeple.com or cambridgedictionary.com, and then yeah, you will understand the word, but probably next day you're gonna forget it because you didn't do the homework of opening the dictionary and actually looking for it. But the other thing that you said that it was very important, and I would like to go deeper on that, is the motivation part, because I think that's the key of the thing. Because you, for example, said we need to read different texts, not only novels and the Twilight novel or the Titanic novel. No, we really need to go deeper on scientific documents, for example. But then you start reading on that, and then you go like, this is too heavy, I'm not going to continue. So that's why motivation, pays tribute, and you really have to have a big one in order to continue the process. Like when you go to the gym and this is too heavy, I'm just gonna continue eating whatever. But it really takes part of that, and I love that you're mentioning that motivation is one of the keys to access to that information.
And the problem is that motivation cannot be synthesized. I mean, motivation has to come from within. It's again, that's why I say it's not a motivation to get a job. It's not a motivation. It's not necessarily like outside motivation, somebody telling you you need this language level so you can achieve something. No, it's again motivation of wanting to understand and to use that language.
Mhm.
That's it has to come from inside, because that's the one that makes you do the work, because
Of
it's
course, of course.
I mean,
Chris, for people who think, because of technology and because I don't know, age or whatever, there are many, many people who would say, "Yeah, I love books, but I'm not keen on reading a lot, more than watching a series or TV." Of course, books will be always our number one, but can we, let's say, transport that theory on books to films that will take me or help me to go to C1, C2 level, or TV series if I do the exact thing, like I'm gonna watch it not just to enjoy and you know take a look of the actors or actresses. No, I'm gonna pay attention, like really pay attention to difficult words, and I'm going to do the homework with the dictionary and stuff. Can I move to one, or is it definitely books will give me, or take me to that place?
okay. So yes, of course, and I don't believe. I mean, it's unless you're illiterate, I don't think it's you don't read. You do read, so you do read, even if you don't. You're not interested in scientific journals or novels, or as you say, or like real books and stories. You read. You read every day. What do you read? You can read if your thing is video games. You
All right.
read
Okay.
about them.
There
You
you
read,
go.
right? If your thing is fashion, well, you read about it. If your thing is celebrities, I don't know. If your thing is music, you read about it. So you do read in your everyday life. So, and in fact, listening or watching movies and things, it's also reading. I mean, it's you're reading an oral text, but you're still reading and receiving. So basically, it's a receptive skills. Either if you're reading or if you're listening, it's a receptive skill.
Yeah.
So yes, watching series and listening to music is in fact one of the best ways to get the pronunciation right. because while singing is when the language is really displaying all these connected speech things. Like, I mean, it's not the same to say an apple to say an apple. You know,
Uh-huh.
so you can hear it when you're listening to music, or you can hear it when you're watching series and things. So it's important to do both things. Now, two things, two very important things there. So when you're either reading or watching or listening, it's important that you don't go to the dictionary immediately. I mean, you hear the word, you don't know what it is, and then boom, dictionary.
All
No,
right.
keep listening, keep reading. At the end of the idea, at the end of the conversation, at the end of the paragraph, if you don't know what it is, if you didn't figure out what it was, then use a dictionary.
All right. So you can
Because
understand the word by context, like you,
critical
that's what
thinking.
it means. All right.
Exactly. Critical thinking. And if you allow your brain to do some critical thinking, then it's much better. And then if the word is interesting enough for you, then go to a dictionary so you can use it actively, what I just said.
Okay.
And the second thing is, when you're listening, then what's important is to imitate. Actually imitate. When you're a Spanish speaker or a speaker of another language, you tend to associate the sounds that you hear in English to the phonemes or the sounds that you are familiar with in Spanish. So, for example, the vowels, you tend to go to a, e, I, o, u,
All
and
right.
everything close to it, you go to one of them, right? But then you need to imitate to be able to discover all the sounds you can make in your sound box. You know, where does the tongue go, where does this t go, and that's an air, and that is a, and you need to understand that. How? Imitating.
All
So
right.
listen and really imitate, um just as, for example, when you're singing a Shakira song, right? You don't sound like Shakira per se, but you kind of do, you know.
Yeah, yeah. You try to imitate what they're saying. Exactly.
Exactly.
Um, Another thing that I love about this conversation is that when you say you need to read whatever. Let me make myself clear. People think, okay, I'm gonna read things to become C1. So what is it? Shakespeare, and I'm gonna read the science book. No, you can read comics, and it's still they're valuable to get to that level. Which is, I love what you're saying because of that. People think, I have to read, I don't know, I had Ernest Hemingway. I have to read, I don't know, any other super elevated thing. But no, I mean, you read what you like. Just pay attention to these new words and stuff.
Exactly.
All right,
Exactly.
cool.
Because there's academic English, and if you want to study and be an academic and work and things, yes, there's academic English, there's business English, but there's also everyday language. And so everyday language is also a C1, a C2. So
That's it.
read whatever you like, but be exposed to the language, actively exposed to the language. Because I also hear students say, but I mean, I listen to the radio all day, and yeah, but when are you listening? When I'm driving my car, are you listening to the music and paying attention to the lyrics, or are you driving?
No,
Because I mean,
music
if
is
you're
just
doing both,
company.
that's not safe. Be careful. Don't do
Yeah, if
it.
you are looking like that, the radio, like, what is
Yes,
he saying? That you're
yes,
gonna crash.
yes, not
One
safe.
last question. One last question, Chris. So let's suppose that you're talking to a person. How do you define that person as an advanced person? And let me give you options. And if you have any other option, that would be great. Because the thing is that many students say, oh, you are advanced if you sound advanced in pronunciation, even if your only vocabulary is good, bad, yellow, car. But if you have great pronunciation, you are advanced. Now, the other option is I might sound a little bit rocky on my pronunciation. I don't have that Native American accent or Native British accent, but I can say coaster, I can say knob, I can say words that people are like, what is that? Ah, because I know this vocabulary. So which one weights more when you talk? I mean, the pronunciation, the enunciation, or the vocabulary?
That's an easy one because there are more speakers of other language than are native speakers. So the thing is, you don't have to sound native. In fact, you shouldn't. I mean, only, I mean, okay, no, that was too bold. Not is that you shouldn't be a, you shouldn't you shouldn't
You shouldn't
worry
focus
about
on
it,
that. You shouldn't
because
focus
that
on,
means,
yeah.
yeah, because that means negotiating or letting go of who you are culturally. If you are a paisa, if you are a rolo, if you are Mexican, if you are Chinese, if you are French, then you don't necessarily have to let go of who you are to speak English. So if you have an accent, it doesn't matter as long as you are, and the word is intelligible. If
Oh,
people can understand what you're saying, and not even native speakers tend to be lazy and say, "What? I don't understand." Then,
yeah.
you know, F them, yeah, because it's not their problem. English is not their language anymore. It's the lingua franca. So I can sound however I want to sound as long as people understand what
Okay.
I am saying.
Wow.
Now, what makes you advanced? Again, the complexity of the ideas. So take a simple example. I say I live in Medellin, right?
All right.
But that's a basic idea. But then you can say something like, oh, no, well, I've been living in Medellin for all my life.
All right.
The
All right.
complexity of the
Yeah.
idea, right?
Okay.
Or Medellin is my hometown. So words like hometown instead of I am from Medellin, then that makes it a bit more complex.
All right. Okay. So
Yeah.
if you sound American, that's great. That's great, but it doesn't have to be the major purpose when you are being trained to speak English. I love that because I used to think, and part of me still thinks, you kind of have to imitate a little bit what they do. Because then we have the example that I'm not gonna take this call. I'm sorry, but then you have the example of Sofia Vergara. I mean, she speaks like a Colombian, like a terrible Colombian, but I mean, she's one of the most well-paid actresses in America because she can speak English. I mean, she can speak English. She's the star of a TV show. That means she can communicate. But of course, she makes fun of this thing, obviously, which is her accent.
I think she's milking it. I think her accent is not that thick. Yeah.
I know. Yeah,
I think
I
she's
have the
milking
same
it.
theory. Yes, I have the same
But
theory.
whatever. But whatever. I mean, she's given us permission to speak, to be proud of our accent. That's all.
Exactly.
That's all.
Exactly. That's great.
The thing is, I mean, there's a, it's a gift. There's a characteristic. Some people have a characteristic. Look, I'm as Pisces as can be. Why do I sound like this? It's because of my ear. You know, it's just that I have this thing that if I go to Mexico, 5 minutes later, I'm speaking Mexican. If I go
Yeah,
to Bogota, 10 minutes
Venezuela.
later, I'm
Yeah, of
speaking
course.
Rolo. So it's just my ear. You know, but it doesn't mean that first everybody has it, or that everybody has to have it. It's just a
That's good.
thing, you know.
I think many students are gonna be relieved by listening to that. Like, then I do not have to speak like that because I'm not from there. All right, I just need to be understandable, and that's it.
Exactly.
Wow, Chris, this has been amazing. Thank you very much for being part of this book and this podcast. And you've seen over there the LinkedIn of the teacher. She can, I mean, you can go there and talk to her if you need it. Thank you very much, Chris, for all the inspiration through all these years. And thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Alejo. Thank you for the invite, and good luck with everything. And guys, yeah, keep it. I mean, again, on a last note, um, think of Americans speaking Spanish. Do they care about their accent?
They don't.
So, so why should we? Yeah,
That's good.
that's,
That's good. All right. Bye bye, girl.
bye bye. Thank you.